Order of business is the induction of members of the Board of Governors. I'd like to call on Mr. Greg Brown and also call on Mr. John Hoffman, our Senior Vice President, General Counsel, a member of the Bar of the State of New Jersey, to administer the oath of allegiance and office, please.
I, Greg Brown,
I, Greg Brown,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the same,
and to the governments established in
and to the governments established in
the United States and in this state,
the United States and in this state,
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
all
the duties of the office
of
member of the Board of Governors
of the Board of Governors
of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey,
of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Welcome back, Mr. Brown. Now, call on President Barshi for matters presented by the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make my comments very brief because Chancellor Cantor is going to give the campus report momentarily, and I want to make sure that she has the maximum amount of time available. First, with regard to the Middle States, the self-study report that you approved last week has been sent to the Middle States. The on-site evaluation will be March 19th through 22nd, and it will involve all of our campuses as well as a number of you around the table. And I want to thank Barbara Lee and all the other members of her staff and the rest of the university community who have worked so hard in the past 18 months, I guess it is, to prepare this extensive document and to make sure that we've completed it on time. And it was a valuable exercise for us, and we're looking forward to the on-campus evaluation and feedback from the committee. As you know, the issues with DACA continue to be at the forefront for our students and for our faculty and staff. We've continued to be very, very much in the forefront of arguing in favor of the Protection for Dreamers, generated a new round of letters in support of that, and the state of New Jersey is joining the lawsuit against the rescission of DACA. So we'll see what happens there, and we hope that our legislators can finally act on this with some positive outcome. We have plans for a symposium coming up. We will be holding a symposium on racial and ethnic tolerance on Tuesday, March 27th. The title of the symposium will be Fighting Hate While Preserving Freedom, Best Practices. We'll be hosting experts from around the country to speak in addition to our own faculty and community members. I will be getting to you through Barbara Lee a full roster of the day. It'll be a day-long event. We'll be streaming it to all of our campuses, and we'll make it available publicly. I think it's going to be a very, very positive event that everybody can participate in. It will be co-hosted by me and by Professor John Farmer. John is the former law school dean and now is the director of the new Miller Center for Community Protection and Resilience. He has worked with groups in Brussels and Paris and around the world in dealing with some of these difficult issues, and will be helping us to get the right conversations going and to have the right exchange of ideas. Quick update on fundraising. As you know, we had a record year last year with about $209 million raised. As of December, the first 6 months of the year, we raised $123 million. It's slightly ahead of our very ambitious fundraising target, but about 30% higher than last year's year-to-date at this point. So I'm very optimistic that we're doing well there. I just want to announce to everyone who hasn't heard that we received a wonderful gift from Gary and Barbara Rodkin of $15 million to build the Center for Academic Success in our student athletics program. I'm also pleased to note that our endowment, as of the end of fiscal year 17, moved up to about $1.2 billion. Still a very low number for our peer group, but about 75% higher than when I arrived here in 2012. And we moved from 101st place to 84th place. I'd give you the actual number, but of course that doesn't mean much after yesterday, so we'll have to wait and see next week where we actually stand there. I also wanted to let you all know that we are entering into collective negotiations with 24 of our negotiating units at Rutgers for contracts that expire in June 30th. We have our first meeting scheduled between the heads of all of those unions and our negotiating team. It's already set up and we'll have it later this month. And we look forward to what I hope will be a collegial and profitable collective bargaining exchange. We have a tremendous amount of respect for the faculty, staff, and others who work for us and their input into operating the university. And we know that we will be able to reach a conclusion that is in the best interest of the university and of our unions and their membership. So that process is getting into full swing in the next few weeks. And that's all the comments I have for now.
Thank you, President Barchi. Next up is Chancellor Cantor to tell us what's going on this campus.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to Rutgers Newark. I want to begin by framing my comments around the notion of a diversity bonus and the ways in which the state of New Jersey, Rutgers as a system, and certainly Rutgers Newark can leverage its extraordinary diversity for a bonus, for solving important problems, for being pragmatic and making an advance in a knowledge economy, for really taking hold of what it means to be a public university. And I want to frame it around, first of all, the notion that Earl Lewis and I talk about in a Huffington Post piece, and that is, are we prepared to become the architects of the future we imagine? One that leverages a diverse democratic society. We stand at a moment in this country, and certainly New Jersey is an incredible representation of this, with on the one hand a diversity explosion. Diversity on many dimensions, but certainly, as Bill Fry at Brookings talks about, diversity is remaking the racial demographics of this country. But we also stand at a time when higher education, both nationally, and of course we're not immune from that, is held with some skepticism by many groups who feel they're not at the table. And it's interesting to note that in a lot of survey research recently, it's quite obvious that most institutions have made very little progress in the last 35 to 50 years in capitalizing on these demographic diversity trends. But, as you know, Rutgers as a system, and certainly Rutgers Newark, has made a lot of progress in that way, and I want to frame it around that. But first, to do that, let me put the framework that Earl Lewis and I use in our book series, our compelling interest book series, on the value of diversity for democracy and prosperity. The volume that just came out from Scott Page, The Diversity Bonus, makes and shows with a tremendous amount of empirical data the point, as we say here, that what we want today are high-ability people who think in different ways and can function together, playing off each other. I didn't touch it, I swear. Okay, playing off each other and maximizing the emergent properties of diverse, inclusive, well-functioning teams. If you look at the latest economics data, it's very clear that in the post-industrial service economy, where there are lots of challenges that require group kinds of processing, really require teams of all sorts, everything from the arts to sciences to public policy making requires getting around a table and creating a joint solution, a joint problem solving, innovation, an innovation economy. We know, as Scott shows in that book, that in fact, diversity on many dimensions, so we're talking here about cultural and identity diversity, we're talking about age and, I guess they don't like the diversity bonus. We're talking about age and geography, we're talking about all kinds of diversity that maps on to what you bring to the table, what the knowledge repertoire you have is. And most importantly, we're talking about the fact that diversity is hard. You don't reap the diversity bonus in inclusive teams unless people know how to bounce off each other, how to relate to each other, how to listen to each other, how to work in teams. And we know that that's one of the skill sets that, for example, our students of the future need to be developing. So when we think about reaping the diversity bonus, let's turn to Rutgers University Newark, where we have the human capital and intellectual capital elements that prime us to reap that bonus and to really create the most intense, inclusive, diverse, collective intelligence, if you will. So first of all, in the last 4 years, the enrollment of this institution has increased by 18%, and in that increase is an increase along multiple dimensions of diversity. Race, ethnicity, socioeconomic class. We have a wonderful, substantial group of undocumented students. We have a huge number of students who transfer, for example, from county colleges, where we know the vast majority of first-generation students will have their first taste of higher education. And we have a growing and resilient population from Newark itself, which we are very proud of. We also have, and these are of course just a smattering of photos to tweak your imagination, but across all of, do we know what's going on?
I think it's the keyhole right here. So if you want to keep the clicker over here, and that way the cable won't fall out.
Thank you. So across a variety of fields, from public administration to law, to our honors living learning community, to environmental science, to the Cornwall Center and our Humanities Action Lab, we have new talent on the faculty and staff side that is really motivated to reap this diversity bonus. So let me show you how we do it on the ground. So first of all, one of the things we know about a diversity bonus is that collaborative spaces where you have interdisciplinary work and intergenerational work and inter-communities, that is, for example, universities and community, universities and industry, cross-sector kinds of collaborative spaces, like we are building with Tony's help and other people's help, like we are building in Haynes and Express Newark, in the new Honors Living Learning Community building that is going up as we speak, in the Life Science 2 building that just opened. We have exactly the kind of spaces on the ground, if you will. I did not touch it. It doesn't like my slides, I guess. We have the spaces on the ground that really enable the kind of bold, collaborative, inclusive teams to come together. I didn't touch it.
No, it's not.
Okay, sorry. And these are very intergenerational and inter-community. So we have STEM students from our area high schools. We've got groups of bold scholars working together in the Honors Living Learning community. In the art scene in Newark is extraordinary, and Express Newark is certainly doing it. And in these kinds of spaces, we're honing the skills to reap that diversity bonus. So let me do a deep dive now into 3 or 4 areas where we take critical social and economic challenges on the ground in Newark, and we create these kinds of diverse, inclusive teams. So first of all, Newark 2020, which many of you have heard about, is extraordinarily diverse and a cross-sector team effort. And team here from Rutgers' point of view is both Central and RBHS and Rutgers Newark. We are a deep part, a very important part of the mayor's initiative across all sectors in this city to increase the local spend by anchor institutions from 3% to 20% over this period of time, to do hiring of local residents, and to create spaces where Newark anchor employees can live and thrive. And what I think is so wonderful here is it's truly an example of a cross-functional, diverse team. So you have not only procurement and supply chain management, intellectuals like Kevin Lyons from the Rutgers Business School, who is analyzing and mapping all across Newark all the opportunities to connect local corporate anchors with the kinds of spend that can be put to use for local Newark businesses. You have David Trout from the law school, who's done a remarkable study of what equitable growth will look like in Newark. So what does it mean to think about Newark not being the next Brooklyn, that is not being a gentrification hub, but rather being the next Newark, where in fact you won't have displacement of residents, but you'll have equitable investment and growth. So that's just one example. A second example is in our Safer Newark Council, which is a cross-sector collaboration between the mayor's office and all of the law enforcement groups, our School of Criminal Justice, the Newark Community Street Team, the Youth Violence Consortium, and then our faculty are using GIS and crime hotspot analyses to pinpoint where the kinds of interventions should go. But what's, again, very important here is that you've got this very inclusive, diverse team. Inclusive in terms of the expertise people bring to bear, inclusive in terms of age and where they're from. Are they from the community or from the criminal justice school? Are they from the police? All very inclusive to try to reduce the pockets of crime in Newark, which, by the way, are concentrated in only 20% of the streets in Newark. Newark, in terms of its vast majority of its streets, is safer than most cities its size, but instead, it's very highly concentrated, and so we have a real chance of interventions that work. And then an area I really want to emphasize here, because this is a pride and jewel for Rutgers Newark, is our whole work in entrepreneurship. Ted Baker has really created in the business school, but it goes across the law school and into SPA and arts and sciences, an incredible ecosystem around entrepreneurship. And the notion of the ecosystem that he has created is in fact that entrepreneurial value creation is the relationship between non-obvious assets and how you put them to bear in various opportunities. So he creates, let's talk about what he creates for students. It's an extraordinary experience. He and all his colleagues, and they themselves are a very diverse team. But here's what Ted says about how you create entrepreneurial value creation, and let me quote him. The ability to make these connections is greatly enhanced by cognitive and identity diversity. Differences in knowledge, experience, motivations, and functional skills increase the possibilities of seeing novel uses for any asset, human, physical, technological, scientific, and increase the possibilities of solving intransient problems. And that's exactly what we want our entrepreneurs to do. So they put together students in teams, for example, and again, let me quote from Ted. He says, in each of our programs, we deny students their preference to form teams with their friends and put them into teams that are diverse on as many dimensions as we can. For example, academic major, gender, ethnicity, nationality, age, work experience, socioeconomic background. Because our student body is so diverse, we can have the chance to build massive cognitive complexity into our teams. And they really have done it. They have created, many of them, as you know, have won prizes for this. Globally, they have created an incredible infrastructure of well-functioning, collectively intelligent entrepreneurial teams. And the infrastructure is actually goes very broadly in terms of all different kinds of entrepreneurial group enterprises, from a re-entry population in Are You Flourishing, to technology commercialization, to in Express Newark, Lanier Richardson is doing an arts and media entrepreneurship hub. It goes throughout this whole ecosystem, and it's a perfect example in my mind of how collectively intelligent teams then play off each other and can synergize and create a much bigger value for the system. And then let's finally, in another example, let's think about what Mark Luck and other neuroscientists are doing throughout the West Ward in Newark, where they are creating African American Brain Health Initiative that intervenes and then marks and does longitudinal data. But African Americans have, as you may know, twice the likelihood of Alzheimer's than the national rate. And so we have here in Newark an opportunity to really bear down on that by creating, again, a very diverse team. And what I want to point out about this team is it's diverse at every level. So we're using retired black nurses, we're using faith leaders, we have Rutgers Newark scholars, we have a very diverse research team, a community advisory board, and we are creating pioneers doing African American brain health in the high schools. So this is, for me, the example of not only creating on-the-ground diverse teams that do cutting-edge intervention, but then of paying that forward, if you will, so we're creating the next generation in the high schools of Newark. Now, all of that is good, except, and this is the big pause factor, certainly in this country at this moment, you can't reap the diversity bonus just by numbers. People have to learn to interact. They have to learn to walk in each other's shoes to really be able to bring out, in a collectively intelligent way, what everybody at the table has to offer. Diversity work, as Catherine Phillips at Columbia Business School says, diversity work is hard work. And this is where, in my mind, there's nothing better than the public humanities and arts to get people thriving in a diverse context. So, as one example, if you think about our newest Americans documentary, multimedia documentary platform, which I know I've talked about, 4 of our students during the 2016 election put together a documentary called Hijabi World on what it feels like to walk down the streets of Newark and elsewhere in New Jersey wearing a hijab. That has gotten over 2 million hits on the New York Times Lens website. They are teaching you intrinsically what it means to walk in each other's shoes. So when you then hit the table of some challenging business team and some entrepreneurship work and some Safer Newark or wherever you're going, you have a much better chance of understanding what the other person is about and listening to them and reaping the benefit of their intelligence. And we have lots of examples here, culminating in, we've just been named one of 10 universities nationwide by the Kellogg Foundation and Newman's Own Foundation and AAC&U to create a Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center between the university and the community, which is dedicated to the notion of what walking in each other's shoes is really about, of what understanding history is about, and then understanding how you can push that forward and move it forward. And we're really excited about that. And then finally, sometimes people think that the kind of anchor institution, diverse teamwork we do in Newark is just Newark. So in case you had that view, I want you to cross borders with me from Newark to South Africa, where Alexis Moras, one of our incredible young jazz talents, is playing in Cape Town, to the township that Ted Baker and his entrepreneurship colleagues are creating entrepreneurial enterprises in South Africa, to the Malta Global Migrant Project, and then my absolute favorite, which is our Shabazz High School students in Newark and their STEM teachers are learning how to create solar kits that then are being taken by our international experience group, Clayton Walton and our students here, delivering those solar kits in India, and Nicaragua, and all Haiti, and all over Puerto Rico. They're going to Puerto Rico over the spring break to deliver those solar kits. So here you go from high school to teachers being trained to the global enterprises that have an effect on the world and on those problems. And we are very much at the table in the Council of Europe is putting together a broad anchor institution collaborative, if you will, to look at what innovation, diversity, and inclusion look like all around the globe. And what's really important about this is it's deeply local, place-based work that resonates globally and that puts us on the global stage. So from my point of view, the diversity bonus is crossing borders, and Rutgers Newark is riding along with it. Thank you.
Does any members have any questions for her?
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Sorry about the
We got the
I guess
message.
we can do entrepreneurship and not technology.
It's an age factor.
We got the message.
Thank you. Okay. I'd like to move on to the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs and call on Mr. Roper for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Committee on Academic and Student Affairs met on January 10th by teleconference. The committee heard from Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences Chancellor, Dr. Brian Strong, who reported that the name of the Department of Urban Health Administration in the School of Public Health is being changed to the Department of Urban Global Public Health. The new name reflects revitalized emphasis on Newark and collaboration with the host community, and expresses the interrelationship between urban and global health, which are key themes in the RVHS strategic plan. Next, Rutgers University New Brunswick Chancellor Deborah Duda reported that the Graduate School of Education program title of Master of Education in Social and Philosophical Foundations of Education is being changed to Education, Culture, and Society. The revised nomenclature more accurately describes the curricular content of the master's program and aligns it with existing GSE course and program offerings in education, culture, and society. Further, the new name reflects emerging areas of scholarly interest that are represented in similar programs at peer institutions. Rutgers University Camden Vice Chancellor Mary Beth Daisy presented the appointment of Dr. Joanne Robinson as a university professor, highlighting Dr. Robinson's remarkable career as a nursing scholar, teacher, and founding dean of the Rutgers School of Nursing, Camden. The committee agreed to recommend to the Board of Governors for approval the resolution under the consent agenda. On behalf of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, I now have the pleasure of recommending for the Board's approval candidates for the award of honorary degrees and commencement speakers at Rutgers University Newark and Rutgers University Camden. First, I recommend Newark-born Dana Owens, also known as Queen Latifah, musician, actress, philanthropist, and humanitarian, for an honorary Doctor of Fine Arts degree and to be named commencement speaker at the Rutgers University Newark ceremony in May 2018. Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I would like to present Anita Hill to be named commencement speaker and recipient of an honorary Doctor of Laws degree at the Rutgers University Camden ceremony in May 2018. Anita Hill is a professor of social policy law and women's gender and sexuality studies at Brandeis University. She received her Juris Doctorate degree from Yale Law School in 1980 and began her career in private practice in Washington, D.C. Her experiences with Judge Clarence Thomas were cast into the spotlight when she was called to give testimony before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee during the confirmation hearings for his appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. Professor Hill has been the recipient of numerous awards and a powerful voice addressing equality and discrimination for more than 25 years. Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Stewart, that concludes the report of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Roper. I'd like to move on to the Committee on Finance and Facilities and ask Mr. Angelson to give the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 matters for action and then 2 very brief matters for information. Mr. Calcado, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President, presented for endorsement the proposed resolution to authorize the university's negotiation and execution of an easement agreement with the Public Service Electric and Gas Company. PSE&G has requested permission to expand its permanent easement area on the Cook campus of Rutgers in New Brunswick by 1.736 acres in order to accommodate planned improvements to their high voltage transmission infrastructure. Additionally, they requested permission to obtain 4.368 acres of temporary construction easement areas that would be terminated once the improvements in question are constructed. PSE&G is willing to pay Rutgers the full appraised value for the permanent easement and the temporary construction easements in a total amount of $287,800, and will perform additional work on Rutgers property, such as replacing a culvert that will be usable by Rutgers Gardens maintenance vehicles and repaving a portion of the log cabin road. Some of this property is trustee land, and therefore this resolution will require consent of the Board of Trustees as well. I move the resolution for approval, as noted in the board book. Sir.
Before I ask for a second, there are a couple individuals who requested to speak to the board on this topic. I'll remind them that they have 2 minutes for their comments. The first is Professor Hughes.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a little bit of a handout here. That'd be great. So I'm here as a professor of anthropology in the School of Arts and Sciences in New Brunswick, and also, as you know, Vice President of the Rutgers AUP-AFT Faculty Union. I mentioned to you last week that we have been asking since September for bargaining dates to negotiate the collective agreement that would be valid from July 1st of 2018 for the next 3 or 4 years. The update on that is that we still have no bargaining dates. Thanks to President Barchi, we do have a meeting to talk about talks on February 22nd. That would be the 4th such meeting that I've engaged in, going back to September. The letters you're getting summarize the state of those talks about talks. We don't need more talks about talks. We need to talk and to bargain the next contract. We have just released this week a set of proposals. They are, in fact, very elaborate position papers. And the reverse side of the paper you're getting has a link to those position papers, which represent, I think, some proposals that actually follow on many of many of Chancellor Cantor's points. What we would like to do in bargaining is diversify the faculty, diversify doctoral cohorts, diversify the undergraduate student body, and improve the access of the people of New Jersey to all 3 Rutgers universities. We would also like to enhance equity, which is another point that Chancellor Cantor was very wise to mention, enhance equity among those 3 Rutgers universities, and equity across racial and gender and ethnic lines among the faculty. I'd imagine the people in this room would appreciate these kinds of ideas. I do hope you'll look on the web at our position papers, and I do hope you'll encourage the administration to engage with us on these points. I probably need not remind you that you represent the people of New Jersey, and we have a set of bargaining positions that are designed to make Rutgers University serve the people of New Jersey better. That is, have this university serve as an engine for the political and economic enfranchisement of the widest possible swath of the people of New Jersey. So this is what you are about. This is what we are all about. And I hope that you on the board will encourage the administration. I just lost amplification here. I hope that you on the board will encourage the administration to sit down and engage in collective bargaining. You know that the administration is legally obligated to do this. They are dragging their feet. We are running into a situation where the contract will expire for 20,000 workers on July 1st, and we won't have a deal, and we won't have a respectful campus here where workers and managers work on a common mission. And you can prevent that. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Professor Murphy.
It's not professor, it's a research teaching specialist. First of all, Chairman, distinguished members of the Board of Governors, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Thomas Murphy. I'm a 37-year veteran researcher for the Department of Surgery at the New Jersey Medical School. I am the co-president of one of 3 health professionals and allied employee locals at Rutgers. HPAE represents 2,500 Rutgers employees who work statewide throughout the system. HPAE has 4 labor contracts with Rutgers that expire this coming July 1st. Along with the other unions and their expiring contracts, there will be some 20,000 Rutgers workers without contracts by the end of June. We are here today to stress the immediate need for the administration to get to the bargaining table with all the unions now, and to do so in a manner that provides sufficient scheduled days for bargaining sessions in order to have a successor contract in place by the expiration date of the current contract. Our memberships are not interested in continuing the administration's practice of starting contract negotiations late, scheduling half-day sessions weeks apart, one date at a time, causing contract negotiations to drag on for months and resulting in new contracts years after the contract has expired. 20,000 Rutgers workers are united in their quest to hold Rutgers administration accountable for settling all our contracts by their expiration dates. We are asking that this Board of Governors also hold your own administration accountable to get to the bargaining table and to settle these contracts by the expiration dates. Rutgers' success in the past, present, and future depends on its employees. And again, I want to thank you very much.
Okay, back to Mr. Angelson's resolution. Can I ask for a second, please?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next at our meeting, Executive Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer Michael Gower presented for endorsement the proposed resolution authorizing Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, to enter into a supplemental indenture of trust and certain other agreements.
I need to ask for Dr. Cantor and Mr. Huntley to leave room at this time.
We're doing it.
Sorry, no problem. I'm going to start again. So Mr. Gower presented for endorsement the proposed resolution authorizing Rutgers to enter into a supplemental indenture of trust and certain other agreements in connection with the issuance by the university of tax-exempt and taxable general obligation bonds, and to take other action in connection with those indentures, likely in March. This resolution requires the consent of the Board of Trustees as well, and it puts the following limits on any transactions. The aggregate proceeds of the bonds shall not in any event exceed $150 million. The 2018 series bonds shall bear interest at a fixed rate with a maximum total interest cost not to exceed 5% per annum, and the final maturity of such 2018 series bonds shall not be later than May 1, 2058. Mr. Chairman, I move the resolution in the book. Thank you very much.
Before I ask for a second, we have another individual who would like to address the board. This is Teresa O'Neill.
Teresa unfortunately had to step out, so she's given me her place kindly. I'm a Rutgers Newark graduate student here, and just wanted to bring to your attention two things really quickly.
You can't take someone else's place.
But unfortunately, all the other people waiting outside also can't get in either, because we do want to hear what is going on in our governing body as participants in this community. As a Rutgers graduate employee here, I'm concerned as I'm approaching my 4th year here in this program, and I'm not sure what my contract is going to contain. Because when I was brought here under a previous contract, it was in negotiation, and the contracted terms that were on the table at the time unfortunately don't reflect the contract I am living under today. And as a graduate employee here and a graduate student, as I interact with the outside community, evaluating whether or not to attend Rutgers, I unfortunately last week had to tell them I don't know what working conditions are going to be like because my university hasn't been able to commit to hearing our concerns and improving the standard of living here. It's been since 2013 that graduate workers haven't yet had an increase in their salary. We can't live on this amount, and I cannot in good faith share that Rutgers is a great place to go to school or to work when we can't see that the needs we need, the money we need to live and to pay our rent in our community and to teach our students, as we're all here to do because we are public service to the state. We can't do this with so little. So I'm very concerned as a Rutgers member of this community that we don't have the ability to know going forward we will have enough to live on. So therefore, as all the graduate students that I speak for, we are representing Rutgers to conferences and to incoming students for next year, and we cannot tell them in good faith there will be a contract that we can explain to them before they have to decide in April whether or not to come here because we're not even negotiating at the table. I understand Teresa wasn't here. I thank you for your compassion in listening today.
Going back to Mr. Ankelson's resolution, can I get a second, please? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two quick last points. Mr. Gower provided us with an update on the Administrative Information Systems projects, and Ms. Detloff walked the committee through the fiscal year 2019 budget process. Finally, Mr. Breeding provided a thorough overview of the university's insurance programs and gave us a really deep dive. Thank you very much. That concludes my report.
I'd now like to call on Dr. Cantor for the presentation to the Committee on Health Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee met 2 days ago, and Dr. Vincente Gracia, Senior Vice President for Clinical Affairs, reviewed changes to the bylaws of Rutgers Health Group and presented the proposed resolution approving changes in the bylaws of Rutgers Health Group, Inc. to the committee for endorsement. The proposed resolution was endorsed by the committee, and I move the resolution for approval as noted in tab E. Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Sorry, we have a couple individuals like to address the board again. I'd like to first call on Mr. Charlie Cradaville.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Charles Cradaville. I'm an alumnus of the university. I'm also the editor of a community newspaper in New Brunswick Today, and I do have something I'd like to hand to the board members. I think I have enough copies. So it's hard for me to comment on these changes to the bylaws because they're not available yet. But I have a severe concern about the potential for conflict of interest. And what you'll see in the document I'm sharing with you is an email that was sent to your general counsel, Mr. Hoffman, on May 26, 2017, very polite, asking what steps, if any, have been taken to prevent conflict of interest in situations where Rutgers is doing business with Robert Wood Johnson. Of course, Mr. Hoffman's father is on the board of directors for the Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health Systems, the largest hospital chain in New Jersey. I believe you have at least one partnership with them, at least one transaction with them. And so it's a fair question to ask what steps are taken to mitigate conflict of interest or to prevent conflict of interest. I actually spoke to Mr. Hoffman about this following your June 15th, 2017 board meeting, and he told me, quote, "I'm not really talking about this. I don't know of any dialogue. I've got some business I've got to attend, maybe some other time." And then at that point I was told by the Rutgers police to, vacate and get away and stop asking questions. So these questions still stand. The following morning, I followed up with media relations and sent a follow-up email to Mr. Hoffman, copied the media relations person on that email, and asked again, for a follow-up to this very simple question about conflict of interest. And this is not the first time I've looked into conflict of interest involving healthcare and involving the administration of this university. And I think every taxpayer in the state of New Jersey, every student at Rutgers, every member of the faculty deserves an answer to these questions. If Mr. Hoffman's father is on the board of directors at Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas, what steps are being taken to prevent your general counsel from having a conflict of interest? Is he recusing himself from matters involving Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas? Or is somebody else stepping up and filling in for him when those instances come up? Or is there nothing in writing about this? Is there no policy to mitigate or prevent conflicts of interest? I think the public deserves an answer, and so I took the trip in the bad weather today and brought my camera, and the camera's pointed directly at you, and I'd like to hear your answer, sir.
It was like taken.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have a very robust process for evaluating the kinds of relationships that our personnel and relationship that we have with our partners. We have reviewed this situation and found out that there is not a significant conflict of interest that has to be remediated.
So I'm sorry, I don't understand how there's not a significant conflict.
You had your 2 minutes of comment. We actually, addressed it to some extent, but this is not a dialogue.
Well,
you get 2 minutes of comment.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Hoffman, though. Mr. Hoffman's the one with the conflict. I want to know.
That's not the venue to do that.
When would be the venue? I've sent him polite emails.
This is not a discussion here. I'm sorry.
What is the correct venue? You told me this is not the venue. I know if I go up to him after the meeting, the officers are going to tell me to get away, and he's going to tell me he's got somewhere better to be. What is the correct venue for me to get answers to my questions?
Mr. Cradle, you are a reporter, and you understand that, and it's your job to do what a reporter does. We are at a board meeting here. You are entitled to 2 minutes of comment. It's not a dialogue. Out of respect for that, we did give you an answer, and we're going to move on to the next person. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hoffman still owes us his answer.
The next person who has to speak is Professor Brian Lee.
Good afternoon, Dr. Borchi, and may it please the board. I'd like to speak briefly to the circumstance of those who are affected, or rather those who might remain unaffected by the policy of the Rutgers Health Group. As you surely know, some 6,500 employed by this university, which claims to be revolutionizing healthcare, are uninsured. I'm one of them, but my intent here is not to moralize about healthcare. Instead, I'd like to offer some perspective. I graduated from this university in 2015 with degrees in physics and English literature. My first appointment to the faculty was in 2013, during my third year as an undergraduate, and I currently sit on the board of the PTL chapter of the AUP-AFT. I taught and was taught physics, and the simultaneity in that made me able to see with utmost clarity that the struggles beyond the classroom translated directly to the struggles within. And these are the struggles that the students pay the most for. We millennials call it the "Are you screw?" You may have heard of it. And this, I think, is the most dire consequence of managing the university as an ecology of capital rather than one of student welfare. I'd like to close my remarks on a variation on, or with a variation on done, true to my education. If the salary of an adjunct or dean be washed away by the market correction of February 1st, the name of Rutgers, my alma mater, is diminished. And this is why I stand before you in earnest in this plea for equity. Thank you.
Okay, going back to the resolution for Dr. Cantor, I'd like to get a second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Dr. Frank Ganazzi, President and Chief Executive Officer of University Behavioral Health Care, UBHC, and University Correctional Health Care, UCHC, we needed more acronyms, cited 4 matters that required the committee's endorsement to move forward for Board of Governors approval. First, the minutes of UBHC Leadership Committee meeting of October 17, 2017. Second, UBHC staff appointments, reappointments, and clinical privileges of November 21, 2017. Third, the University Behavioral Healthcare Quality Improvement Quarterly Report dated October 2017. And finally, the University Behavior Healthcare's mission statement. These 4 matters were endorsed by the committee and will be moved under the consent agenda. Dr. Ganazzi then presented an overview of UBHC's mission, its presence throughout the state, its outpatient programs and quality indicators, and value and efficiency metrics. He specifically highlighted the road ahead for UBHC, which includes a new focus, programmatic and integrated research, enhancing the education mission, and increasing cross-Rutgers collaboration. Dr. Ganazzi concluded his report by reviewing new UBHC initiatives, new school-based expansions, and current UBHC grants. Dr. Brian Strom, Chancellor for the Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences and Education Vice President for Health Affairs, provided an RBHS progress report for fiscal year 18, including key leadership appointments, key department chair recruitments, and new searches currently underway. He also provided a financial overview for RBHS, including a budget versus actual financial summary from fiscal year 14 to fiscal year 18, as well as extramural awards for fiscal year 17 and the first quarter of fiscal year 18. Next, Dr. Strom highlighted the new Clinical Research Center, which opened on November 14 and will provide clinical trial management, quality control, trial development, implementation, and control services for sponsors and contract research organizations. He then reviewed various faculty development initiatives, including the Faculty Mentoring Program, numerous leadership development programs, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and the Faculty Development Symposia. Dr. Strom concluded his presentation with an overview of fiscal year 18 goals for RBHS. Next, Ms. Kathleen Brownwell, Senior Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration, presented a fiscal year 18 year-to-date financial summary and walked the committee through potential financial scenarios. She also provided a system status update and reviewed the university's clinical revenue, tuition and fees, and salaries and wages for fiscal year 18. Ms. Bramwell concluded by outlining RBHS strategic investments for fiscal year 18. Dr. Gracias provided a clinical update to the committee and began by outlining the Rutgers Health Group priority rubric for 2018, noting the focus on a patient-centered approach. He then reviewed key initiatives and long-range goals for Rutgers Health and provided an update on new policies recently adopted, New Jersey Medicaid to physician services, and the launch of a clinical incentive matrix based on quality, patient satisfaction, productivity, and access. Dr. Gracias concluded with an analysis of key data points and an update on each unit within Rutgers Health Group. Next, Chancellor Strom provided an update regarding the letter of intent signed with the Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health System. And then changes to the bylaws of the School of Health-Related Professions were provided to the committee as an informational item, and there were no questions regarding the changes. The committee concluded the meeting with an executive session, and that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Mr. Rigby, the chairman on the audit committee, to give his committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a summary of our January 22nd meeting. We had two matters for action. First, we heard from Ms. Shelley Massey, KPMG lead engagement partner, and her colleagues. They discussed KPMG's engagement letter to provide professional services for the purpose of examining the university's financial statements, performing agreed-upon procedures for the intercollegiate athletics program and the U.S. Environmental Protection Letter, and delivering other audit services for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018. They also provided an update on the 2017 NCAA agreed-upon procedures report and a summary of reports and letters in progress. The committee unanimously agreed to endorse the resolution reappointing KPMG LLP as the university's external auditors and engage KPMG to perform audit services for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018. The resolution is under consent agenda tab F. In terms of matters for information, we heard from Michael Gower, Executive VP of Finance and Administration and University Treasurer. He provided the committee with a lessons learned overview of the 2017 financial statement preparation and audit process. Next, Mr. Richard Axe, the Vice President of Finance and Associate Treasurer, provided a summary of the Ernst & Young Financial Reporting and Audit Readiness Project. He explained the project's successes and deliverables, and also discussed the need for further assistance given state filing requirements and continuing efforts to improve processes and get newly hired personnel up to speed. Mr. Gower then reviewed a report on professional service fees paid by Rutgers during the fiscal year ended June 30, 2017, and noted all items, both vendors and amounts, were as accepted. Ms. Michelle Noren, Senior VP and Chief Information Officer, provided the committee with an update on the guilty plea of a former Rutgers student responsible for recent DDoS attacks against the university. She also discussed the Office of Information Technology's continued efforts in educating the university to minimize phishing attacks. Mr. Gower then presented an update on the Cornerstone Initiative, specifically within grants and contract accounting. He commented on the efforts to review and validate all projects within the system, as well as to rectify errors found during the process. Mr. Gower also highlighted additional Cornerstone initiatives and renewed training efforts across all campuses. Next, Mr. Tim Fournier, Senior VP and Chief Risk, Ethics, and Compliance Officer, provided an update on activities within the University Ethics and Compliance Office. He highlighted progress made on the department's coding assessment initiative and discussed continued efforts related to HIPAA training and awareness, including noted improvements in unit behavior. Mr. Fournier also provided an overview on how his unit processes hotline complaints received. Next, Ms. Ruth Stevens, Chief Audit Executive, presented 5 audit reports to the committee covering 3 NCAA compliance audits, a review of the Center for Alcohol Studies, and a review of the Central Authentication System. Ms. Stevens also discussed the follow-up efforts for monitoring the implementation of past recommendations. Finally, the committee met in private session with KPMG, followed by management, university ethics and compliance, and audit and advisory services, and then followed by discussion amongst committee members. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next up is the Committee on Intercollegiate Athletics. I call Mr. Angelson to give that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm standing in for our chair, Ken Schmidt, who is both ill and traveling, and sends his apologies to all. So we've had 2 meetings since the last board meeting. The first one was a teleconference on January 17th, at which Athletic Director Hobbs reviewed the proposed employment contract for the assistant football coach, John McNulty, and our committee endorsed the proposal. That was the only business at that meeting. The second meeting was February 5th, just 2 days ago. We had a wonderful introduction to our new Chief Medical Officer for Sports Medicine, Dr. Yvette Rooks. She introduced herself in great and impressive detail. She went on to review the components of the Rutgers Sports Health Program and the strengths of an interdepartmental approach to student-athlete care. Dr. Rooks explained that while the center of it all, in her words, is Rutgers, the goal is to have a positive impact on health in the state of New Jersey by focusing on education, research, patient care, and community. We then had an academic update from Mr. Scott Walker, the Executive Director of Academic Support Services. He provided the committee with statistical information pertaining to GPA rankings of student athletes within the Rutgers University New Brunswick athletic program. And then we had a facilities update. Athletic Director Hobbs spoke about the current space constraints for academics within the athletics program, specifically with regard to study halls and tutoring. He was excited to share what Bob mentioned earlier about recent conversations with Gary and Barbara Rotkin, both alumni of Rutgers, that led to the largest gift in Rutgers athletics history with a donation of $15 million. The donation will serve to support the academic achievements of approximately 700 student athletes, be the construction of the Gary and Barbara Rotkin Center for Academic Success. Athletic Director Hobbs further noted that this generous gift would allow Rutgers to combine the already planned soccer and lacrosse space with academic support services and athletics administration all under one roof. We then had 2 logistical reports from Athletic Director Hobbs. He explained that Rutgers is withdrawn from a 2-game football series with UCLA scheduled for 2020 and 21. And instead Rutgers will play Syracuse at home in 2020 and in the Carrier Dome in 2021. Finally, Mr. Paul Perrier, Executive Associate Athletic Director for Compliance, discussed recently passed student athletic health and well-being legislation obligating universities to provide 2 years of medical coverage after separation from the university for injuries sustained by student athletes. He also discussed transfer regulations as well as curbing early recruitment. That concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to stick with Mr. Hankelson and ask him to move the items on the consent agenda.
Will do. Bear with me 1 sec, please. Are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda? Hearing none, upon recommendation of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, the Committee on Audit, and the Committee on Health Affairs, I move that the Board approve the items contained in the consent agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is Mr. Gower to give the report on the Executive Vice President of Finance and Administration and University Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reporting on the meeting of the Joint Committee on Investments of January 9th. This was a brief telephonic meeting with a couple of items. One was the consideration of investment in the Global Public Equity Manager and rebalancing of other investments. Those recommendations were endorsed by the committee and the information is in the minutes. Next, there was a review and update of the long-term asset allocation plan approved by the committee during May 2017 by our Director of Investments, Jason McDonald. And finally, a review of one of the equity managers for future consideration. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Next I call on Professor Rabinowitz to give the University Senate report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. The Executive Committee of the Senate plans the business of the Senate and considers various charges to committees, receiving reports and docketing them for the full Senate debate. The Exec Committee met this past Friday, February 2nd, right here in Newark, and we were given a very, very thorough tour of Express Newark. Thank you, Peter. And we had a very, very nice, frank lunch discussion with Chancellor Cantor. Thank you, Nancy. No new charges were issued during the exec meeting, but preliminary investigations on 2 issues relating to proposed charges were scheduled. They were dealing with Rutgers identity and ratings reports, the issue being multiple variations of Rutgers' name being used in inconsistent reporting. Kim, that'll probably be coming in your direction just for some Q&A. And employee parking costs, the concern being different policies regarding charges levied on legacy Rutgers or RBHS employees. Tony, we may be talking to you about that one a little bit. We next meet on March 2nd in New Brunswick. The main work of the Senate is carried out by its other committees and panels. At present, the standing committees have before them 15 pending charges in addition to their standing charges. Details are available at the Senate website. In addition, an ad hoc committee is considering the sale of alcohol at various athletic stadiums. The Rutgers University Senate has met once since Peter's last report to you. On January 19th, the Senate received the Budget and Finance Committee's annual report on the Rutgers University budget. In addition, it received a report from the Student Affairs Committee and adopted its recommendations on increasing student voter turnout in federal, state, and local elections. The Senate next meets February 16th in beautiful downtown sunny Camden. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Next, old business. Is there any old business? Any new business? Can I get a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?